Okay, so hello everyone, good day. At this time, we'll be going to discuss another important topic intended for this course. So by the way, I am Maglangit Jel Saavedra and I will be briefly discussing to you the concept of meta-language in grammar teaching. So with regards to this topic, we'll be having a series of slides composed of a variety of subtopics for us to understand the concept of meta-language, and this topic will also allow us to know the distinct types of meta-language and learn to value meta-language as an important element or as an effective learning strategy in grammar teaching. But before touching, before touching at the main topic, which is the meta language, it is essential for us to know first about explicit and implicit approaches in grammar teaching. So, what are these two in grammar teaching? So, what are their stand or what are their role in grammar teaching or grammar learning? So, first is the explicit. So I will be discussing to you the explicit approach. So explicit in here, instruction is where students are instructed in the rules or patterns or guided to induce them themselves. So in here, in explicit, all are stated clearly and in detail. So leaving no room for confusion or doubt for language learners. So it is conducive. It is conducive to knowing the rules of a language. Better for adults learners, especially those who are in the stage of who are in this stage of decline, having this declining capacities to acquire languages. So be clear. Be clear by clearly stating or specifying instructions, or even discussions, students will no longer inhibit themselves and develop an interest in acquiring the certain language. So, on the other hand, the implicit is implicit is somehow maybe very fitting or hard for complex rules, which are difficult to articulate and internalize. So the language learners may encounter difficulties because it is an implicit approach. So implicit implied, though not plainly expressed, so causing doubts or confusions from the learner. So it is indirect in when it comes to its approach. So it involves acquiring skills, knowledge without conscious goal or attempt to learn. So it helps in preparing learner for natural communicative situations or those casual way of communicating which we tend to talk indirectly. So moreover, it promotes gaining of basic linguistic skills. So in simple word, explicit, we go back to explicit. So explicit means direct and implicit it is in indirect way. So, knowing those two concepts, now what is better or which of the two is way better? So, to answer that, explicit versus implicit is too general to resolve categorically. So, a gentle blend, just a reminder. So, for to make a better impact when it comes to language learning or language teaching. So a gentle blend of implicit and explicit will be better, if not the perfect way to teach the language. So at least a combination of these two will be the best alternative in teaching certain language. So it is essential to know or to understand this concept because these are both useful in languaging. So it is important to understand and know these two concepts because they plays a role in giving instructions on how we approach our students when it comes to language learners, especially for us language majors. No, so at this point, without further ado, so at this point we are down to the meta language. So what is meta language? So meta language is a technical language. Why is it a technical language? Because It is the language that we use in discussing a language. So explaining the language itself. So it is not just the casual language that we utilize every day or in casual setting, but it's a language about language itself. It is used to talk about language. Okay, so giving its definition, the word meta means self-awareness. For example, metacognition means being aware of one's own thoughts. So metacognition means being aware of one's thoughts. So then meta language then refers to an awareness of one's own language as it is being used. So our metalanguage ability is directly related to our knowledge of grammar and vocabulary, since both this form the mechanics, the bedrocks of language. So our metalanguage is somewhat directly related to our knowledge because it is an awareness. It is an awareness of this concept, especially the basic or the foundation. Those are the grammar and the vocabulary which serves a foundation of learning the language. So as an illustration, let us read the sentence, to further understand what is meta language. So, for example, the boys is noisy and must saw the principal soon. So, what have you observed in this sentence? So, this sentence, if we read it, it may seems funny when we try to read it. So, there are mistakes in its structure. So, first is the boys is, suppose it is are. So tackling about the subject verb agreement, no, it's supposed to be are, and must saw is incorrect. There's a mistake in its form, so it should be see. So the boys are noisy and must see the principal soon. So in here, given that meta language is used to talk about language, it gives us the ability to understand and to analyze the language itself. So this ability is acquired through meta language. So by via having this good meta language, we'll be able to understand or correct the mistakes that we can see in the different contexts, or especially in language. So this example, we have noticed the mistakes because we have this good meta language or the awareness of this language. So going further, so it is the meta language. It is the language used to talk about language. So from the definition itself, it may sound meta language may sound very difficult, but simply meta language is used to talk about the language itself. So meta language is language that talks about the language itself. It is the language that is used to analyze. It is the language that is used to explain or define the features, the rules, and structures of a target language. So the purpose of metalanguage is to provide a precise and specific way to discuss and study languages, including their grammar, syntax, semantics, and pragmatics. And there's a notification. So metalanguage is the ability to sense that something is wrong with the sentence construction and explain it. So just like what we have observed in the previous example, by metalanguage, we are given the ability to sense if there is a wrong or if there is a mistake in the construction of the sentence, and we will have the ability to to correct and to explain what is the mistake or what is something if there is something wrong with a specific context or specific sentence. So it takes proficiency in grammar. So the rules and language used to be able to know that a sentence is grammatically wrong and state the reasons. Of course, it takes proficiency. You should be proficient in not actually proficient. You should be proficient in grammar for yourself to evaluate what is the mistake, or even by knowing the sentence structure, or even knowing the rules of grammars, you'll be able to correct the mistakes, or evaluate the mistake that is seen in a different context. So for example, like ganina sa sentence, we have observed the mistake. So through proficiency in grammar, you'll be able to connect or analyze what is the mistake, or what is missing in a specific example or in certain context. So, Fortune in 2005, cited in Ellis in 2016, he identified three distinct types of metalanguage. So we have these three distinct types of metalanguage. So this was done in order to describe the kinds of metalinguistic interactions between students in a task that is collaborative and form focused. So first is the metalanguage A. So what is the metalanguage A? This refers to technical terms such as past, word, present, and plural. So the basic structure of grammar. The next is the metalanguage B, refers to the non-technical terms used for generalizations about language rules such as mean, general, sense, and specific. Then following is the metalanguage C, refers to a non-technical terms used in interactions about language as say, write, and change. Okay, so moving on, how are meta language in use? So how then is this meta language developed? So how can we develop this meta language? So through the consistent and persistent use of language, your proficiency in it, trained and guided by incompetent user like your trainer, increases. So through consistent and persistent use of language, you'll be able, in learning a language, if we used to for example, if we are willing to communicate, if we are willing to use language in daily activities, or especially in school activities, then we will be able to develop the proficiency, the fluency of using this language, and also through the guide of the more knowledgeable others. So through the guide of the teachers, through the guide of instructors, we will be able to upgrade or to increase our understanding, or to increase our awareness, especially in language. So there, the meta language is being developed. So it bears repeating then that meta language is formed and becomes highly refined over time after practice. So we always believe that practice makes perfect. So through the repetition of using this language, we'll be able to upgrade ourselves. We'll be able to increase meta language, or develop meta language within ourselves. So going further, meta language also involves a working knowledge of terms used in language. So if not the errors the errors you make will be nameless. So there should be an evaluation. So in terms of, you will gonna evaluate yourself if there is this stage of there is the upgrading of level, because if all the time you are using the language and doing so many errors without evaluation, so these errors will become nameless. So there will be no effective learning when it comes to language. So in 2010, so is meta language useful? Do you believe that meta language is useful? So here we will gonna know the importance or its uses in language. So in 2010, paper by Ellis titled "Meta Language as a Component of the Communicative Classroom: Pedagogical Implications of the Meta Language" were summarized as follows. So first, students have different metalinguistic backgrounds. So when using metalanguage, teachers should be conscious of this and try to standardize of its use for a given class. You all know in teaching, we'll be encountering different learners having this individual differences. So we should not generalize this. We should not over generalize or give only one approach to our students. So we should try to standardize our strategy in giving instruction towards our students, because we have this different metalinguistic backgrounds, and this will matter in learning the language. Next is number two. Metalanguage is most readily useful for advanced learners, but it is but its use can be scaffolded appropriately for intermediate and beginner learners. So meta language, as we all know, learning a language, it takes so much time. So those advanced learners will most likely ready for meta language, as they can explain, as they can analyze, as they can discuss, because they has this ability, they has this awareness of this language. They're aware of the structure and the grammar. So for those intermediate and beginner learners, so by providing their needs and learning, they will be able to develop it step by step. But meta language is most likely intended or readily useful for advanced learners. So number three, passive knowledge of language should be an important intermediate goal before expecting learners to be able to use metalinguistic terminology activities. So there should be an upgrading, there should be an enhancement, or there should be an upgrading of level about when it comes to language. So the use number four, the use of metalanguage and instruction may be best suited for reading and writing tasks. Why? Because through reading, after reading, of course this include expansion, which include oral communication. So after reading, we will always observe this in a basic education. So after reading or after even writing, there is a task of which includes the students to expound the text through oral communication. So this will help develop. So the use of meta language comes in, so they will be able to explain the language. So by explaining, it is the process called meta language. So it talks about language. Next, in addition to its value in classroom, metalanguage may be considered an effective learning strategy that contributes to a learner's autonomy. So of course, if given that the instruction is in implicit form, which is the instructions is indirect, then the students will tend to search for the definition, search for what is missing, or search for what is search to fill in the gaps that is the teacher missed to expand or missed to specify. So they tend to develop autonomy within themselves. And now, let's go further about the benefits of this meta language. So first, it gives you meta language gives you a vocabulary for your mistakes, so you remember them. So by noting your mistakes, then it will be taking into account as your vocabulary. So and the next time you will encounter those specific words, then you will be able to correct the previous mistake that you have committed. Then second, it helps you to communicate with your teacher as you use a standard way of explaining error. Excuse me. Third, it allows self-correction, having learned the rules of language to identify and avoid them. Four, it forms the basis for building further knowledge in vocabulary and grammar. So, somewhat it is more focused. It is mostly focused and enhancing the vocabulary and the grammar rules. No, so it builds your confidence that you are learning the correct things in language. So by given that meta language gave us the awareness of the certain language, so it helps us to build confidence that you are really learning the correct things in language. So because meta language, we tend to avoid, or we tend to commit mistakes, or we tend to avoid by using those mistakes. So we try to standardize and correct things, especially the language is technical, very technical. So we're almost finished. So to summarize it all, the ability of using language accurately according to grammar rules carries great weight in English language. So meta language plays a role. It plays an essential role in learning the language, especially for those intermediate or beginner learners. So metalanguage, or the ability to understand one's own use of language, is built from a strong grasp of grammar rules. So moving on, good good metalanguage to be able to identify and explain grammar errors or poor language use helps us in correcting our own language mistakes. So by using metalanguage, we try to evaluate the mistakes. We try to correct and explain the grammar errors or poor language use. So by metalanguage, it helps in correcting our own language mistakes, because again, this metalanguage talks about the language itself. So it talks about the mistakes, it talks about the grammar rules. So this metalanguage plays a role in language learning. So the casual activity, or the everyday activity that we done, especially in schools, like for example in our major classes, which talks about language. So it is the process there is called the meta language. So it the explanation, the process on integrating or instilling the different concepts of meta language is or of language rather, is a process that is done by meta language. It gives us the awareness, it gives us the ability to understand, to analyze, and to discuss the language. I think that would be all for my report. And if there are questions, then you can post it on the GC, so that mom and I could will give more emphasis on that certain question. So I believe that would be all my presentation. Thank you and good evening.